Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, she, he, and this is Literally Graphic. And today I'm back for another round of my Anti-Ableism TBR, link in the cards to my initial TBR that I posted back in July of 2021. If you click through, I have also gone back and linked to all the subsequent reviews that resulted from that TBR. I definitely like some of them more than others, but I'm really glad to be trying to bring this into more focus for myself. As I described in that previous video, my intentions in making these TBRs is to read and review books about people who fall outside of what society deems perfect ability, with a preference for people talking about something they have experienced themselves, although not exclusively. I particularly chose this framing of anti-ableism because this is a very diverse community. Some creators and characters certainly identify as part of the disabled community, but that is not the case for everyone who finds themselves on the receiving end of ableism and similar prejudices. I just wanted to go with the biggest umbrella. Constructive comments always appreciated. Moving right along, I also wanted to highlight another disabled podcast here before we get into the TBR. Disabled After Dark, hosted by Andrew Gurza, has been running since September 2016 and has almost 300 episodes. Listening to this podcast from the beginning, it has been very interesting to hear about all the topics that Gurza talked about and all the interviews they've conducted. It really put in stark relief many things about being a disabled adult that I would not have otherwise even known to consider. Definitely highly recommend. Flipping over to my TBR, obviously I don't have flip-throughs yet, but as I have come to do, we will get a cover and an example of the interior art, the synopsis, publication information, and ideally a note on where I first came across a book and why I want to read it. The order in which I highlight these books has no bearing on the order in which I will actually read and review them. So to start with, let's kick things off with 7 Miles a Second by David Wojnarowicz, James Romberger, and Marguerite Van Cook. The 68-page graphic memoir was originally published in 1996 by DC Comics. The official synopsis for the later Fantagraphics edition is as follows, quote, 7 Miles a Second is the story of legendary artist David Wojnarowicz, written during the last years before his AIDS-related death in 1992, and drawn by James Romberger with colors by Marguerite Van Cook. The graphic novel depicts Wojnarowicz's childhood of prostitution and drugs on the streets of Manhattan, through his adulthood living with AIDS and his anger at the indifference of government and health agencies. Originally published as a comic book in 1996 by DC's Vertigo Comics, an imprint best known for horror and fantasy materials such as The Sandman, 7 Miles a Second was an instant critical success, but struggled to find an audience among the typical Vertigo readership. It has become a cult classic amongst fans of literary and art comics, just as Wojnarowicz's influence and reputation have widened in the larger art world. Romberger and Van Cook's visuals give stunning life to Wojnarowicz's words, blending the gritty naturalism of Lower East Side street life with hallucinatory, psychedelic imagination that takes perfect advantage of the comics medium. This new edition will finally present the artwork as it was intended, oversized, and with Van Cook's elegant watercolors restored. It also includes several new pages created for this edition. End quote. Among many other things, I'm extremely intrigued to read such a very short graphic memoir. Next up, I want to revisit Marbles, Mania, Depression, Michelangelo, and Me by Ellen Forney, a deeply personal graphic memoir published by Avery in 2012. Quote, shortly before her 30th birthday, Forney was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Flagrantly manic and terrified that medication would cause her to lose creativity, she began a years-long struggle to find mental stability while retaining her passions and creativity. Searching to make sense of the popular concept of the crazy artist, she finds inspiration from the lives and works of other artists and writers who suffered from mood disorders, including Vincent van Gogh, Georgia O'Keeffe, William Styron, and Sylvia Plath. She also researches the clinical aspects of bipolar disorder, including the strengths and limitations of various treatments and medication, and what studies tell us about the conundrum of attempting to, quote, cure an otherwise brilliant mind. Darkly funny and intensely personal, Forney's memoir provides a visceral glimpse into the effects of a mood disorder on an artist's work, as she shares her own story through bold black and white images and evocative prose. End quote. I initially read and reviewed this memoir back in 2016, but obviously that review is now private. I certainly think it's well worth the revisit, plus my review of Horney's follow-up is still live, which irks my completionist compulsion. Thirdly, I am extremely interested in picking up Kimiko Does Cancer, a graphic memoir. It keeps popping up in my life, and I thought her contribution to the menopause graphic anthology was really well done. This memoir is apparently also on the shorter side at 96 pages and was published in 2020 by Arsenal Press. Quote, at the age of 25, Kimiko Tobimatsu was a young, queer, mixed-race woman with no history of health problems, whose world was turned upside down when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. In an instant, she became immersed in a new and complicated life of endless appointments, evaluations and treatments, and difficult conversations with her partner and parents. Kimiko knew that this wasn't what being 25 was supposed to be like. But then she didn't have a choice. With tender illustrations by Keet Janiza, Kimiko Does Cancer is a graphic memoir that upends the traditional cancer narrative from a young woman's perspective, confronting issues such as dating while in menopause, navigating work and treatment, and talking to well-meaning friends, healthcare professionals, and other cancer survivors with viewpoints different from her own. Not one for pink ribbons or runs for the cure, Kimiko seeks connection within the cancer community while also critiquing the mainstream cancer experience. Honest and poignant, Kimiko Does Cancer is about finding one's own way out of a health crisis. End quote. Next up, a title that only came to my attention because it has been nominated for an Eisner Award, Parakeet by Espe. Originally published in French in 2017, Parakeet was subsequently translated into English and published in 2021 by Graphic Mundi, an imprint of Penn State University Press. Quote, Bastian is 8 years old and his mother is ill. She often has what his father and grandparents call episodes. She screams and fights, scratches and spits, and has to be carted away to specialized clinics for frequent treatments. Bastian doesn't like it when she goes, because when she comes home, she isn't the same. She has no feelings, no desires, and not much interest in him. According to the doctors, Bastian's mother suffers from bipolar disorder with schizophrenic tendencies, but he prefers to imagine her as a comic book heroine like Jean Grey, who may become Dark Phoenix and explode in a superhuman fury at any moment. Based on the creator's own childhood experiences, The Parakeet is the story of a boy whose only refuge from life's harsh realities lies in his imagination. In his eyes, we see the confusion and heartache he feels as he watches his mother's illness worsen and the treatments fail. Through his eyes, we see how mental illness can both tear families apart and reaffirm the bonds of love. Poignant yet playful, The Parakeet follows Bastian's struggle to accept the mother he has while wishing for the mother he needs. End quote. Fifth on this particular list is The Third Population by Aurélien Ducadre and Jeff Porquet. Originally published in French, it was also recently translated and published by Penn State University Press. Quote, founded in 1956, the French psychiatric clinic Le Chesnay is an open and welcoming facility that houses about 100 people of all ages. It provides traditional forms of care for people with serious mental illness, but it does so in a uniquely supportive environment where patients and caregivers participate equally in the day-to-day operations of the clinic. The driving force of Le Chesnay is The Club, a nonprofit organization serving as a liaison between the clinic and the outside world. It arranges cultural and recreational outings for the patients, as well as activities like concerts and exhibitions that bring the public to Le Chesnay. As a result, days at the clinic are quite lively and never routine. Author and illustrator immersed themselves for a time in the culture of Le Chesnay. Like everyone there, including the patients, survivors, and caregivers, they took part in the daily chores of the clinic, cooking and cleaning. They participated in group events and even led a comics workshop to teach the residents about their craft. The Third Population is the engaging, inspiring, and often poignantly funny result of this project. The Third Population is a sensitive and uncompromising portrayal of daily life in this singular psychiatric health facility where patients are encouraged to build human relationships in spite of the difficulties that mental illness can pose. As the supervisors and caregivers take part in the daily activities of their patients, differences are erased and empathic bonds are formed, with the result that sometimes it is difficult to distinguish the patients from the caregivers. End quote. Moving right along, I also decided to tackle The Awkward Yeti Presents How I Broke Up with My Colon, Fascinating, Bizarre, and True Health Stories by Nick Saluk. I forget how I initially heard about this book, but it was published by Andrew McNeil Publishing in 2020. Quote, fascinating, bizarre, and educational true-life medical stories retold in cartoon form by the creator of the best-selling Heart and Brain book series. Mysterious illnesses, freakish injuries, x-rays revealing something weird that got stuck in your foot. These strange but true stories are among the 24 medical tales retold in hilarious fashion by New York Times bestselling author/illustrator Nick Saluk, featuring fascinating stories submitted by people all over the world. How I Broke Up with My Colon is an educational and highly entertaining tour through the bizarre workings of the human body. End quote. Seventh on this list is Go With the Flow by Lily Williams and Karen Sneeman, because I would like to continue to talk about menstruation. A bit of a side quest, but definitely a bodily reality for so many people that has spent a great deal of time deeply stigmatized. This middle grade contemporary graphic novel was published by First Second in 2020. Quote, sophomores Abby, Britt, Christine, and Sasha are fed up. Hazelton High never has enough tampons or pads, or adults who will listen. Sick of an administration that puts football before female health, the girls confront a world that shrugs, or worse, squirms at the thought of a menstruation revolution. They band together to make a change. It's no easy task, especially while grappling with everything from crushes to trig to JV track, but they have each other's backs. That is, until one of the girls goes rogue, testing the limits of their friendship and pushing the friends to question the power of their own voices. Now they must learn to work together to raise each other up. But how do you stand your ground while raising bloody hell? End quote. Third to last, but certainly not least, another middle grade title and recent Eisner Award nominee that I hope to pick up in the near future is Allergic by Megan Wagner Lloyd and Michelle Nutter, published in 2021 by Scholastic Graphics imprint. Quote, a coming-of-age middle grade graphic novel featuring a girl with severe allergies who just wants to find the perfect pet. At home, Maggie is the odd one out. Her parents are preoccupied with getting ready for a new baby, and her younger brothers are twins and always in their own world. Maggie loves animals and thinks a new puppy to call her own is the answer. But when she goes to select one on her birthday, she breaks out in hives and rashes. She's severely allergic to anything with fur. Can Maggie outsmart her allergies and find the perfect pet? With illustrations by Michelle Nutter, Megan Wagner Lloyd uses inspiration from her own experiences with allergies to tell a heartfelt story of family, friendship, and finding a place to belong. End quote. Next we have Chlorine Gardens by Kyla Roberts and published by Koyama Press in 2018. It's been on my TBR for too long. Quote, Kyla Roberts doesn't do slice of life, she gives you the whole pie. Dealing with pregnancy, child rearing, art making, mental illness, and an MS diagnosis, the parts of Chlorine Gardens sound heavy, but Kyla Roberts' gift is the deft drollness in which she presents life's darker moments. She doesn't whistle past graveyards, but rather finds the punchline in the pitiful. End quote. And finally, to finish strong, I'm also hoping to get to Parenthesis by Elodie Durand. Originally published in French in 2010, I will obviously be reading the English translation that was published by Top Shelf in 2021. Another title to be recently nominated for an Eisner Award. Quote, a triumph of graphic memoir, Parenthesis, narrates the author's experiences with tumor-related epilepsy, losing herself and finding herself again. Julie is barely out of her teens when a tumor begins pressing on her brain, ushering in a new world of seizures, memory gaps, and loss of self. Suddenly, the sentence of her normal life has been interrupted by the opening of a parenthesis that may never close. Based on the experiences of cartoonist Elodie Durand, Parenthesis is a gripping testament of struggle, fragility, acceptance, and transformation, which was deservedly awarded the Revelation Prize of the Angoulême International Comics Festival. End quote. Which concludes this particular Anti-Ableism TBR. I hope you find something you perhaps hadn't seen before to pique your interest. Please feel free to leave any suggestions you may have for me in the comments. Bye y'all, keep reading an organized anti-capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, non-Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.